In this video, we're going to be talking about two different topics. The first of which is going to be running the soundboard. There's a billion knobs and switches on the soundboard. We're going to talk about the basics that you need to be able to run sound here at First Baptist Church. In the second half of this video, we're going to go step by step through what a Sunday morning service looks like if you're the person running the soundboard. Here is the main soundboard at the church, and there's a bunch of stuff going on here, but what we're going to look at first is these yellow sliders right here. These are the main volume control for the main speakers in the building. So on any of these faders, that we call these sliders, there is a mute button. Nothing will work unless you unmute it. So on a Sunday morning, I would want to unmute the main speakers. This is the left speaker in the sanctuary. This is the right speaker. And the third one here is the output that goes to the live stream for people who are watching at home. I'm going to want to unmute all of those things. Typically, I want the main speakers to be somewhere around the 0 mark, a little more, a little less than that. We can go quite a bit less than that if need be. If you go too much more than that, you might start to get some feedback. The live stream volume is set a little bit higher than that, and we don't really move that. It's just kind of preset. Next up, we have each individual channel on the soundboard. This particular board has 32 channels total. We typically don't use anywhere near that many on a Sunday morning, but that's the maximum we could put through the board. Each channel is organized vertically. So if this is channel 1, everything in this column relates to channel 1. In our particular case, channel 1 is the pulpit mic. Then we start plugging in other channels in channel 2, 3, 4. Will be mics that people use for speaking, for singing, for amplifying instruments, some direct channels from instruments that we can plug in directly into the system, and so on. So on each of these channels, first we want to unmute the channel so it's active. We want to bring the slider up to somewhere around 0 or a little less. And up here, we have a gain knob. Now, gain and volume are two different but related things in the sound world. Think about the gain knob up here as being the amount of information that that channel is taking in. So if someone's voice is very quiet, you could turn up the gain and the volume would increase as that mic starts to take in more volume. As the gain increases, however, the mic will start to pick up sounds from farther away. If something's too quiet, we can use the volume slider to make something louder or quieter. We can use the gain to increase the amount of information that the mic is taking in. So we want some kind of compromise between the gain and the volume. If my volume slider is very low, I might find that I have to crank the gain so high up that I'm starting to pick up not just that person's voice, but other instruments and voices around them. On the other hand, if my gain is too low, I could have this volume all the way up and still not be getting enough sound. So I want to kind of make sure that I'm using both the gain and the volume to adjust the level. Up next, we have the EQ knobs. EQ is what we use to balance different frequencies of a voice or an instrument. You'll see we have HF for high frequencies and LF for low frequencies. We can use those just to increase or decrease the low sounds and the high sounds. If something is sounding really deep and muddy, I may want to decrease the lows or increase the highs to make the sound more clear. If something's sounding really shrill and lacking in depth, I might want to decrease the lows or increase the highs. Monitors are the speakers on the stage that allow the musicians to hear the rest of the band. So we have main speakers are our yellow slides. That's largely what the congregation is hearing. They're directed at the congregation. Our red sliders and black are the monitors, which are pointed at the musicians on the stage. We typically run a Sunday morning with 2 monitor channels. Monitor number 1 is labeled as the drum monitor, so that's the back row of musicians, typically our drummer and bass player. So I would turn that on and unmute it. Our second monitor channel is labeled our vocal monitor. That's for the front row of the band, which is usually singers and musicians. Up next, we have 4 auxiliary knobs. These correspond to the monitors, and I can increase what's happening. Say if I'm looking at channel 2 here, maybe that's our lead singer. And if someone in the back row of the band says, hey, I'm having trouble hearing the lead singer, I could say, well, the lead singer is in channel 2. The rear musicians are listening to monitor number 1. So if I take auxiliary 1 in channel 2 and increase that a little bit, they would now be hearing more of that channel, in this example being the lead singer, coming through their monitor. One other thing in each of these columns that pertains to each channel is at the very, very top of the column, there's a red button that says plus 48 volts. That's what we call phantom power. Most microphones receive enough electricity just from being plugged into the system to operate. Some microphones need a little bit more power sent to them. We call that phantom power, and if I press the plus 48 volts, that will send more electricity to that particular mic. Most of our microphones don't need phantom power, but we do have a few that do. Usually our kind of specialty mics, such as the pulpit mic, our omnidirectional mics. We have a clip-on guitar mic that needs it. And as you get more comfortable with the different microphones we have, you'll get a sense of which ones need phantom power and which do not. This small soundboard on the side is what we use to control the audio for our live stream, which people can watch at home. This board is basically only running 3 channels. One channel is from the main soundboard, so everything that's running through the big board will also go through the little board. Then we have 2 house microphones set up on the left side and the right side of the sanctuary that just kind of pick up a general impression of the sound in the room. So on this board, you can control a combination of those 3 sounds. The sound coming from the board, from the left house mic, and the right house mic. A lot of times we don't even adjust that on a Sunday morning. It's just kind of set up and ready to go. The only thing that we really want to keep an eye on is this red box up here will blink with a different color depending on how much sound is going through it. You'll see if I clap my hands that this light will light up green as it's picking up sound happening in the room. If that light lights up red, it means that too much signal is coming through and we're going to want to turn the volume down a little bit. We can do that by turning down the gain on this red box or by turning down the master volume on this soundboard, the small soundboard, which is the red knob on the bottom right.
All right, so the first thing you need to do when you are running sound is you need to turn on the mic board, which has a switch upstairs, and you need to turn on these red switches, which are downstairs. You always have to go upstairs first. So let's go. Right here, we'll turn this on and make sure that the computer is also on. And now we'll go get those red switches. Here are all the light switches for the sanctuary, if you need those. Right here. At the end of the service, you'll need to do those in reverse order. So usually I ask someone on the worship team to shut these off for me, and then we go upstairs and we shut off the other one. So the first thing you're gonna do when you get here, your boards are turned on, you're gonna unmute some of the channels that you need. So we're gonna unmute our main speakers, which are the 2 speakers on the sides of the sanctuary. We'll unmute the live stream board, so that sound's going there. We'll also unmute our monitors for the musicians that will be doing sound check. You're going to then label your tracks. Now these might already be labeled depending on if the team has already practiced with the soundboard. But you can take some tape and just put that on the bottom edge of the channels. So in a previous video, we talked about plugging the mics into the port that is behind the organ on the stage. And so the number 2 port on there means the number 2 channel. So whatever person you have plugged into number 2 down there, you're gonna write their name up here. So let's say that our number 2 port is for someone who is doing the scripture reading. Let's say Kyle's doing the scripture reading, then I might write Kyle's name there. Let's say that number 3 is a singer. Let's say it's Anna, I'll write her name there. And let's say number 4 is the piano is mic'd. Say number 5 is the bass, whatever. So you'll label your instruments, use names, whatever will help you know during the service. If there is a video that's being used in the service, you also need to unmute your video track just when you're gonna play that video in the service. You should definitely check the volume of the video ahead of the service. So you're gonna come in on a Sunday morning to do sound check with the worship team that is practicing, and that's pretty important so that you can kind of figure out how the musicians are playing and how the different sounds are relating to each other. So you're gonna be up here, the team's gonna be down on the stage, and you need to kind of be keeping a conversation going with them. You might ask them, you know, how's it sounding in the monitors? And maybe someone says, like, I can hear the guitar really well, but I really can't hear our lead singer. When you're playing up there, you don't hear things the same way as the congregation does. So the congregation might be hearing all the instruments really well, but because you have those instruments right by you, there might be some things you don't hear. So in that case, that's when you're gonna use these knobs to adjust the monitors, and you'll say, okay, so we need more of that singer in this monitor. And you kind of talk with the team to make sure that they can then hear what they need to hear. You can go down in the sanctuary and listen to the sound sitting in a couple different places, because sometimes you'll be up here and you'll be like, it sounds great, and then you go down there and maybe something is louder or quieter than you thought it would be. If you have some singers who are holding the mic quite far from their face, you can ask them to hold the mic closer. If that is also just they keep doing that, then you probably will need to adjust the gain on their channel. So that's making that mic a little more sensitive to sound from further away. So that will help them to be more clear, but it definitely is better to get them to hold the mic closer. Another thing that you want to make sure you're doing with the sound is balancing the different instruments and singers. So you don't just want to have everyone at the exact same level, because some people are singing louder than others, some instruments are louder than others, and some things you want to hear louder than others. So for example, you need to know who your lead singer is, and that might change from song to song. So that's something you need to talk with the worship team about. So your lead singer, obviously you need to hear louder in the room than the other singers, but you want to make sure you do hear everyone. Another thing that you can do to check the sound is use the headphones, which will help you to just listen to the worship team. So you plug that into the top here. And if you just plug it in as it is now, you're not actually going to hear anything. So you need to press some buttons on the board to get the sounds that you want coming through. If you just want to hear everything that the worship team is doing, then you can turn on this button here, which is After Fade Listen. And this is going to give you basically the sound that's coming through the speakers, now coming through your mic or through your headphones. So you can listen like, can I hear all the singers? Can I hear all the instruments? Is someone drowning someone else out? That kind of a thing. Over to the left on your actual channels, you have a button at the top of each slider, which is Pre-Fade Listen. And so if you want to isolate just one person, let's say we want to isolate Anna's voice. So we'll press that button there. And now anything that you do with these knobs will adjust the sound you're hearing here. But any changes you make on the slider, you won't hear. So if I want to listen to like a combination of just a couple people, I can press those, but you won't hear like how their volume relates to each other with this part. That's what you need to use After Fade Listen for. So you've just finished worship practice and sound check and everything, and now you're running the sound for the service. So you'll have an order of service up here, and you'll want to keep your eye on it and know what to expect ahead of time. You don't want to have all of your channels unmuted all the time, because then you end up picking up feedback and stuff. So usually you want to keep things muted when they're not being used. But that means that you need to be anticipating what needs to be unmuted. So it's important to unmute the next thing, and then you can worry about going back and muting the unused channels later. So for example, let's say we just finished having a worship song set, and now the worship team is sitting down, and we're going to have Kyle going up to the pulpit mic, and he's going to be doing the offering prayer. You'll want to make sure that the pulpit mic is unmuted, and then you'll want to make sure that you've muted again your worship team. Now Kyle is gone and he's sitting back down, and we're going back to the worship team. You want to make sure that those mics are unmuted again, and then you can go back and turn Kyle's mic off. All right, so it's the end of the service. Your worship team is doing the post-load music, and people are getting up and leaving. So you're gonna want to keep everything on your soundboard going until the worship team is done playing. Once they're done playing, you can mute all of their stuff so that you're not picking up conversation. Once the live stream technician has turned off the live stream, then you're going to ask someone downstairs to shut off the red switches for you, or you can run downstairs and do that, and then you come back upstairs and you'll shut off this switch here. It does have to be in that order. It's kind of an annoying order, but it matters.
So there is a very brief rundown of how to run sound here on a Sunday morning. That's a lot of information to take in, but don't worry. If you are running sound for the first time, just getting into it, we will pair you up with someone who is more experienced with doing all of this stuff, who can answer your questions and kind of remind you about some of these things along the way. This video is just intended to be a quick overview to give you an idea of what it takes to run the soundboard, and also to be a reminder, if it's been a while since you've last done it, just to kind of refresh on all the things you need to know to run sound here at First Baptist Church. This is that thing we just did, take 2.